Say no more.
And then it has GPS and location, and it will actually, figure out where you are unless you're exposed.
The call to worship is written by the Sufi poet Ibn Arabi. There was a time I would reject those who were not of my faith, but now my heart has grown capable of taking on all forms. It is a pasture for gazelles, an abbey for monks, a table for the Torah, Kaaba for the pilgrim. My religion is love. Whichever route love's caravan shall take, that shall be the path of my faith. Welcome, all of you, to Eastrose Fellowship Worship Service. I am Eric Tschuy, and I'm standing in today for Reverend Katie Larcell as your worship leader today. It is so very good to know that you are out there on YouTube. A big hello to visitors attending an Eastrose worship service for the first time or second time. And another big hello to those seated here in front of me. Let's all take a moment right now to greet each other. But first, let's turn and look at the camera right there by the clock on the back wall and wave hello to all of our friends who are viewing the service from home. There will be time to continue the fellowshipping after the service. We'll have coffee and tea. So go ahead and be seated, please. So I'm going to depart a little bit from the usual words here of acknowledgement. If you go to the crest of the hill right above the shopping mall down here, you get a view of what used to be the Wapato lowlands. It's a great big wetland filled with wapato and various kinds of food things that the Native Americans used to eat, and went all the way from Troutdale down to Kalama. And they think it had maybe 15,000 people living there right off the land. And that's the traditional land of the Multnomah band of the Chinookan peoples, who spread from Astoria up to the Dalles and past the Dalles. And so that includes also other people who came to visit, such as the Cathlamet, the Clackamas, the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many others. So we honor these original caretakers who are among us still. So a few quick reminders, some boilerplate here of ways to participate in the service. If you're on YouTube, if you want to send a joy or concerns or an announcement, send us a note in the chat. We'll collect all of them and I'll read them aloud later in the service. If you're here in the sanctuary, you can come up in front of the congregation to share a joy or concern. If you have an announcement in person, fill out an announcement form and put it in the collections basket, which will be circulating later. And finally, after the conclusion of the service, there will be a Zoom cafe conversation for those who are online, and we'll give you instructions at that time. And of course, the rest of you get to have the coffee in person here. We are delighted to welcome Reverend Larry Jorgenson in our pulpit today. Reverend Larry is no stranger to us. He's been in our pulpit several times. Don't know how many, but several times.
Not all.
Very good. And he retired from full-time pastoring in 2015 from Trinity Lutheran Church here in Gresham. Previously, he worked in theological education and pastoral care at international, national, state, and local levels. He still lives and works in Gresham with his spouse and near his grandchildren. His sermon today is Things Fall Apart. And you may have heard of it. It's a meditation on cycles of history, and the title came from The Second Coming, a poem by William Butler Yeats. Today's opening words are by Theodore Parker, who was a 19th century abolitionist and Unitarian minister. His words are often quoted by Barack Obama, and Barack thought he was quoting Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King loved this quote and shortened it and made it his own. So here are the original words from our own Theodore Parker with his own theory of history. The quote goes, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. Things refuse to be mismanaged long. Jefferson trembled when he thought of slavery and remembered that God is just." And now the chalice lighting. And I ask Reverend Larry, please, to turn on the chalice. Do not use the lighter.
Yes, he had the tutorial.
Good. Excellent.
Oh, the pressure.
Tough technology. So the chalice lighting is from Eric A. Heller Wagner, and it's called "Blessed is the Fire That Burns Deep in the Soul." Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. Thank you. And now the opening hymn, piano and song. It'll be on the screen. And please stand and sing along as willing and able.
I'll play it all the way through before you want.
owned by Green. And Tara, now a story for old ages.
So I would invite the children in the sanctuary to come join me, but we don't have any today. But we will have pictures on the screen so you guys can follow along. So this is The Circles All Around Us, written and illustrated by Brad and Christy Montague. We begin by drawing a circle on the ground along each shoe. A safe little place for just one person, nobody in this circle but you. You could keep that circle closed to everyone but yourself, but that would be like a library with just one book on the shelf. So let's draw a bigger circle for you and your family to share. Now you can see what all can happen in a circle full of care. It becomes a happier circle as more loved ones come to stay. And wouldn't it be even better if all your friends could come and play? So you stretch and draw your circle even bigger than it's been, and let a few more people know they're welcome to come in the circles all around us, everywhere that we all go, there's a difference we can make and a love we can all show. Yet there are still so many outside the circle who are different in all they do. Though it feels slightly uncomfortable, we draw a bigger circle for them too. It doesn't mean the circle is easy. It can get harder the more we share. But wonderful things can happen when love is known and felt everywhere. As time passes, our eyes open. We see others we really care for. And that's when we ask ourselves, well, what's this circle really there for? So let us create bigger circles all around us for the rest of our days. Let our caring ripple out in a million little ways. In the circles all around us, everywhere that we all go, there's a difference we can make and a love we can all show. As our circles grow and grow, and we watch them wonder-eyed, remember the first circle started with just the love you hold inside. And at this time, we would sing the children out to the RE area, but we're not going to do that today. Hopefully they're watching at home.
Thank you, Tara. That was beautiful. I wish your work is today. Well, you're online, hopefully. So now it's the time to receive the offering. We'll now receive the offering to support this religious community and its work in the world. At Eastrose, we share half of our collection with a local nonprofit that helps people in our community. And this January, February, and March, our partner organization is Snowcap, our local food bank. Eastrose helped start Snowcap decades ago, actually 55 years ago, so long as some of you guys have been alive. We are one of its longest supporters. I hope you continue the tradition of supporting Snowcap, because now, as always, there are a lot of people who need a little help with meals and diapers and shampoo, everyday things, just about anything people need to stay human. For those participating online, you can find donation options on the screen and through the Eastrose website. Here in the chapel, remember, you can put in announcements as the basket goes by. The gifts of the congregation will now be most gratefully received, and Jean and John will be taking them. So the next we'll have the quiet song, and please remain seated and sing along. Find a stillness.
I'll give you just a short intro.
It's also a hymnal, great hymnal, number 352. I love that one. So now we have the reading, and the Reverend Larry Jorgenson is going to do the reading and then the reflection.
Good to see everyone. A couple of words as we launch into this reading. I spent some time online listening to W.B. Yeats himself, an old recording of him reading this poem. And in his voice, it goes like, turning and turning in a widening gyre. I am so tempted to read that poem in exactly that way. But I am going to forestall my inclinations. Gyre is a word that we encounter quickly in the poem. Gyre is the way he said it. Gyre is, in his interpretation, a spiral. Could also be not an upward spiral, but it could be a downward vortex. That's what a gyre is. And last word as we launch into this, I was working on the poem and this presentation in my house, and I noticed a shadowy figure coming to rest on one of our bird feeders, and it was larger than the usual bird. And I looked at this bird who was totally uninterested in the bird seed. And I looked at its sharp beak, and I said, hey, that's a hawk. So I got all excited about that, and as best as I could, I took a picture and I sent it to my daughter, who is a wildlife illustrator. That's what she does. And she said, oh, that's not a hawk. That's a falcon. So there I am sitting by a picture window looking at a bird feeder at a falcon. And I have to think that falcon was really lost. That's what this poem gets to. Feeling of being lost in this widening gyre. So, the reading. Let's read. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Now come a couple of lines that are fairly well known, and these are going to figure prominently in what I have to say later. The best lack all conviction. The best lack all conviction. While the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. Yeats wrote this 100 years ago. And we can imagine his initial audience saying, well, okay, here comes a story about good things in store for us. However, he goes in a different direction. The second coming, hardly are those words out when a vast image out of spiritus mundi. Spiritus mundi is our collective consciousness, or some say unconsciousness, the thoughts, the images, the icons that fill our minds as human beings. He has a vision out of spiritus mundi, and it troubles his sight. So this revelation is a little different from what people may have been expecting. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs. And stop there for a second. You've seen pictures of the Sphinx near the pyramids. So we have lion body, we have head of a man, and we have a gaze as blank and pitiless as the sun. Look in the Sphinx's eyes. It is a gaze that is blank and pitiless. All about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again. But now I know the 20 centuries of stony sleep. What happened 20 centuries ago? Well, there's a story about Bethlehem. William Butler Yeats undoubtedly was thinking about that. We talk about how we had a 20th century. He was writing this in the 20th century. 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast. Its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Thank you, that's the poem. This is the presentation part. So, this poem dates from 1920. He wrote it in 1920, and Yeats published it in 1921. Its centennial was just a couple of years ago. And I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more of a commotion made about this, but there was some. Some people talked about it. 100 years old, this poem. What kind of world did Yeats live in to write such a poem? What kind of poem was it? And, well, we could say he's writing in 1920, maybe a little bit in 1919, maybe a little bit in 1918. May have been piecing together ideas in 1916. That was the time of the Irish Rebellion in Dublin. So even in his home island, there is unrest, disturbance, things falling apart. Things are falling apart. The center, whatever the center was, the center may be a consensus that held people together in some loose fashion or other. That consensus has fallen apart. Things in general are falling apart. But the big thing is, well, the First World War. Now, in my tradition, the First World War is, yes, a linchpin for theological thinking. Up to the First World War, people had great notions of how we would progress, and things would get better and better. And there was all kinds of what? I guess we could call it optimism. And what happened in the trenches of France? What happened on the plains in Eastern Europe? Well, things were falling apart. We can say anything we want about being optimistic. But the actual events, the things coming to pass in the world, give us pause, shake up our thinking about this, and make us possibly very doubtful. So that was another thing going on for William Butler Yeats in those days. Revolution, not just in Ireland, but yes, famously in Russia. People scared about this. And one last thing that should interest us as people who have been through a pandemic. 1918, 1919 is the flu pandemic. A fact about this poem, William Butler Yeats had just been married a couple of years before. They were pregnant, they were waiting for the birth of a child, and in that flu epidemic, women who were expecting were particularly vulnerable. First of all, it wasn't the elderly who were getting sick primarily, and it wasn't the little kids getting sick primarily. It was the, healthy, supposedly active, working folk in the middle. The village I lived in Anchorage lost basically all of its 20-year-olds, all of its 30-year-olds, most of its 40-year-olds. All of a sudden, the church that I'm a part of got into the orphanage business. So he's thinking about that too, undoubtedly. His spouse got the flu. And there was, yes, a time there where they were wondering, is she going to make it? Is she going to make it? Now, when we look at poems 100 years later, well, we forget possibly about these personal crises. It's easier to think about the global catastrophes, but there was a crisis. So he writes a poem. Now, why should we think about this poem now? Some people talked, let's say 1989, 1990, about a new time. The Cold War was over. Some of you possibly are as old as me. And you remember those conversations about how this was going? There is going to be a peace dividend. Do you remember that expression? Peace dividend. No? Yeah, that's going to be great. We won't have to spend all this money on rockets and stuff. We can do other things with this money. We can give it to SNOCAP. It's just going to be great. This is going to be amazing. Our tax money can be used for welfare, for people's welfare. Well, how did that work out for us? Yes, and I see a sage fellow there in the back row going like that. Yeah, it didn't work out for us. We too live in times where, turning and turning in a widening gyre. And our optimism doesn't seem to be panning out. And then we got sick with the pandemic. Somebody wrote lovingly about our time as a visit by the four horse people of the apocalypse. And here recently, we've known all four horse people. All right. Yeats is talking about a widening gyre, about something that is spiraling out of control. Now, I have a model here. And you're going to look at this, and you're going to say, that's what happens when you hang on to your Christmas tree too long. We're gonna move that over. All right. So here we are, a degenerate Christmas tree. I want you to focus on that as best you can, and I want to make a couple of observations about this work of art. We have here a spiral, and the spiral hopefully illustrates a point that Yeats is trying to make, turning and turning in a widening spiral. Now, here in this room, and maybe even on the camera, you can see this darker spiral that is going upward. What happens? People are optimistic. Let's say way down here, 2,000 years ago, Bethlehem, optimism, more optimism, enlightenment, learning stuff, democracy. Better and better. In each and every way, life just keeps getting better and better. Well, Yeats looks at that situation lives the experience that is common at that time and says, I don't buy that. It doesn't seem to be that way. And he proposes a vision that encompasses not only this optimism, but we could also say pessimism. Now, I was here about 6 months ago, and everybody remembers what I talked about 6 months ago here. Everybody, right? Don't need to review it. Well, okay, I will. Fellow here is visiting from Brent Zion Wells Church, so for your sake, I'll let him know. Everyone else knows this, they will remember this. We talked about resentment. We talked about an out-of-control resentment that grabs hold of us and grabs us, drags us down. The genius of Yeats' poem is that he incorporates this feeling of optimism that is spinning out of control. And also this feeling of pessimism that is dragging us down, this resentment. Now, I said, as I was reading the poem, we want to focus on the expressions, the best have lost all commitment. It was right on that first slide, towards the conclusion of that first slide. The best have lost all conviction. The best have lost all conviction. What does that mean? Well, yeah, we used to think everything was good, but, you know, I don't, you know, gee, you know, it's like, I don't know. We used to think that there was human progress, but wow, we just had a First World War. Or we used to think that there was human progress, but look at us now in 2023. We used to think that. We have lost conviction, he says. The best have lost conviction. That's a way of being cynical, isn't it? As you're saying, well, I'm so, just so tired. Someone said to me when I retired, you're going to be retired, and then you'll probably be walking around saying you're retired and you're tired and you're, let's imagine the world being that way. Just tired, worn out. He's trying to describe being worn out. Do you ever feel that our world is worn out? Am I the only one who feels that way? All right. Downward spiral. What Yeats proposes is the following. He writes a long, long book called A Vision. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of that here. But in his book, what he proposes is this upward spiral will spin out of control, and the downward spiral will take over. I'm not going to call it a vortex because it starts getting wider and wider. And so he looks at 20 centuries of history and he says, okay, humanity has been in this widening gyre and narrowing gyre, and somehow these forces have interlocked and interworked. You know, there never has been a time when people have stopped being self-absorbed. But maybe that's overshadowed by good feeling. What he's looking at now is what that last half of the poem is all about. What happens if we begin to discover the world as something that looks back to us with eyes that are blank and pitiless like the sun? In the year 2016, somebody asked me to describe the elections that had taken place that November, and I was able to use that line from Yeats. It's like the world is looking at us with eyes that are blank and pitiless. We do have those times, don't we? Well, in this we have the widening gyre. It's going up, and that's all positive stuff. And we've got the other gyre that's headed downwards, and it's going to go downwards for 2,000 years to the experience of the new Bethlehem and the birth of that rough beast. And this is going to be tough living. That's the way he looks at it. Now, I am not overjoyed by this vision. Why would we be happy thinking about a downward spiral and all of the chaos and problems and arguing? Why would we be happy about that? Why would we be pleased with the fact that many of us have lost all conviction, and on the other hand, people have little to offer besides intensity, intensive passion? Yeats was looking forward, and not in the sense of, wow, this is going to be cool. He was looking forward to the 1920s. What happened in Europe in the 1920s? There were people filled with passion and intensity. What did they do? Do we have people filled with passion and intensity now? And if we think about that for another moment, we have some people who are, yes, losing conviction, saying, well, the center fell apart, things have fallen apart. We've got people who have lost conviction, who are tired and retired and all this kind of stuff. Can they be in conversation with people who are filled with passionate intensity? More I think about this, and I was looking at that falcon out there on my birdhouse. The more I think about this, I'm wondering if that discussion really is a discussion that takes place within ourselves as much as any place else. Are we not sometimes people who are filled with passionate intensity, can't hear anything else, self-absorbed, cynical? So Yeats tries to describe two ways of being cynical. I think it would be great if we started a Cynics Anonymous group. I don't know how to do that, but I think it would be a good thing to which we could belong. I was watching as Tara read the story a little bit ago. That would be a good reading for a Cynics Anonymous group. That would be the perfect perfect keynote address for that group. That'd be so good. Well, I wanted to finish. I do want to finish. I have lots to share. But yes, the old clock on the wall. What I'd like to do for conclusion to some of this, Yeats digs a pretty big hole for us. I don't think that we need to stay in that hole. And I'm not really sure that he's inviting us into that hole either. We had another reading earlier in our time together, and it was from Theodore Parker, right? All right. Now, I want to make 4 quick points about Theodore Parker, particularly that passage that was read. Everybody's got that committed to memory, correct? Well, I'll give you a hint. He starts out saying, I do not understand. I do not completely understand. I don't even partway understand. I am going to approach life and questions of how to live. I am going to approach all of that with humility. I really like the way he started that quote. I don't understand. Who does? So he says that. First point, there's room for some humility. The other day we were reading at the Welsh Church from the Sermon on the Mount. There's all kinds of stuff in the Sermon on the Mount that describes how we don't want to be. You know, blessed are the meek. Well, we don't want to be meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. We don't want to be hungry and we don't want to be thirsty. But yeah, there is a pattern being presented of humility. Can we look at this and say, you know, we're in a little circle called ourselves, but there are circles that get bigger and bigger, as we were hearing earlier, circles that are bigger and bigger. Sometimes I'm going to be wrong. I have grandchildren who help me with that. Our grandpa always gets everything wrong. I'm grateful. Second thing, Theodore Parker talks about the moral universe. What's the moral universe? Theodore Parker, in his day and age, in knowing a little bit about his theology, these are things that I was learning from Katie Thorsell as we were getting ready for this day. The moral universe, he possibly meant, well, the universe has got some kind of moral sense, you know. And probably thought that, but I'm wondering if he had another idea about the moral universe that fits with the idea just expressed. And that would be, you know, morality. What is morality? Morality is making choices, deciding. A moral universe is a very, very complicated thing. And it's best to look at it quite humbly. How many decisions, moral decisions, are being made in this room at this very moment? about different things. That's the way the moral universe is, and each of us bears some responsibility. When we decide something, we're taking responsibility. We're saying it's important. It's important what that, you remember the fellow at the end of that story with the little heart shape there, you know? Depends on what's there. We're responsible. So, Theodore Parker giving us a charge, yes, things spinning out of control, but look at it humbly and consider all of those things that you get to decide. Do I stay in an abusive relationship? Do I help somebody who is hungry? Do it. Just all of it, all the time. That's what the moral universe is. Next thing, we were talking about optimism and pessimism. The more I get on in life, the more I think optimism and pessimism are not deep enough as terms. You know, optimism, okay, well, I think things are going to work out. And yes, optimism is dashed. Could go the other way. It could become what they used to call a crepe hanger, you know. You'd be very pessimistic, you know. It's not going to work out. Nothing ever. So it's, you know, our life could be, or our world could be a constant struggle between Tigger and Eeyore, you know, something like that, going that way. Tigger bouncing up and down on the tail, and Eeyore, oh, nothing ever works out here. It seems to me that Parker's talking about a deeper thing. And that's going to be my last point. Are we people who hope? We can talk about being optimistic. We can talk about being pessimistic, and that keeps us pretty much on the surface. Are we people who can hope? In Parker's view, he believes that all will be well, and we have sung in this place this morning about that. The William Blake poem is about that. We know joy and sorrow. Joy doesn't obliterate our hope. Oh yeah, things are good. I don't need to hope for anything. You know, it's just really wonderful. Sorrow doesn't obliterate our hope either. What is the basis of our hope? What is our conviction? And how can we live out that hope? One thing that hope is the opposite of is cynicism. I'd like to belong to Cynicism Anonymous. I'd like to be more of a hopeful person, not just assuming stuff will work out, but assuming that all will be well. And on a good day, I think it will. So that's a little story about William Butler Yeats and about hoping.
We're going to have a closing hymn, and so if you would please stand and sing. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Afterwards, we'll be able to maybe discuss some more with Reverend Jorgenson.
It's 10:22 in the teal hymnal, but you want to look at the screen because they do two extra verses that aren't in the hymnal. So it's best to just look up. That's why we didn't put the number up.
Okay, the whole community needs to get involved with this. We need singers and we need percussionists. You can be both, but at least choose one, will you? It goes like this. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Try with me. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Mama and Papa are fighting like snakes. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Baby is crying like her heart will break. Open the window. Neighbors lock their doors, build fences so high. Can't see what's to discover on the other side. Here we go, percussionists. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, let the dove fly. Borders round countries and borders round the sky. The only borders that close you are the borders round your mind. Some people have minds, some people have none. But what's the use of money if your heart's gone numb? Let's do it again. Here we go. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, let the dove fly in. This big old world is in a great mess. Open the window, find peace and rest. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Last time. Open the window, let the dove fly in. Open the window, let the dove fly in.
So Reverend Larry is going to extinguish the chalice, and I will read Daring Vision by Maureen Killoran. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth. And Reverend Larry, do the benediction.
And one of the many things that I learned about Theodore Parker was that in some circles he is considered a prophet. According to Wikipedia, he is a Unitarian prophet. A prophet is someone who, it's not about telling the future like a fortune teller. Someone who is a prophet is someone who looks forward and sees that things will be all right. All will be well. The Hebrew prophets are like that. If you go to any Hebrew prophet, a book of the Bible, and look that up, they always end on a positive note. It's going to be all right. So our charge, let us go in peace and strength and healing. Let us find those Cynics Anonymous groups. Let us be there for others. May we be instruments of peace, strength, and healing, and let us go in peace, strength, and healing.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Reverend Larry. Well, this is very inspiring, and I kind of almost hate to make this time of announcements now, but we do have some. And these announcements are from the pedals, which you may have gotten an email or which you can access online at our website. I'm going to highlight a couple of them. Some of these have links also to in the pedals to where the events are happening. One thing, this week's Eastrose hike is canceled on Wednesday. Other things happening, Green Sanctuary orientation on Wednesday at 4. Discussion of the Green Sanctuary 2030 process to transform your congregation. So there's a link in the pedals, Wednesday at 4. You need to go there and find out what it is. It's going to be fun. Faithful Grounding Hour is a monthly gathering for spiritual nourishment on Thursday, February 23rd this month, 4:30. Tara tells us that Eastrose is looking for childcare staff, and Tara's right here. You can also contact her at familyministry@eastrose.org. And there's a webinar on planning the energy future of our congregation. This is coming Tuesday at 10 a.m., taking advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act with, and this is happening with Interfaith Power and Light and with the UUA. And this is something else that I think would be great to be part of. I have not seen, are there any offerings, announcements in the offering baskets? Okay. Okay, so this concludes our service. Folks here in the chapel can now visit with coffee and tea, which I can see has already been pulled up. Folks online can join in our cafe conversation by clicking on the link in our weekly Pedals email, or going to the Eastrose website, or using the Zoom meeting ID provided in the chat. And enjoy coffee and fellowship. And I think there'll be some great things to discuss today.